What's up, folks? This is Justin from Books, Bricks, and Boards, and today I am here to share with you my 5 days with the Fae. That will be 5 days of me learning and playing and explaining the Dresden Files Accelerated role-playing game. So, as I play through this game, I'm also going to be using the Mythic 2nd Edition Emulator and the Alone Against the Spirit Realms solo play supplement that is available on DriveThruRPG. So with that being said, if you guys do enjoy the video, I may actually delve into the original Dresden Files role-playing game too, as there are some significant differences. So there could be a companion video in the same campaign that uses a different rule set. But watching this video, you should have a better understanding of how Fate Accelerated works, what the Dresden Files version of Fate Accelerated offers, and just whether this game may be for you or not. Now, it should be noted that the Dresden Files Accelerated role-playing game is out of print currently, but it is available on DriveThruRPG, and as I actually film this video, it's on sale for $13 right now, so it's quite the bargain. Without further ado, let's get into my 5 days with the Fae. All right, so this is day 1 in my 5 days with the Fae. So I thought it was best to start off with character and world creation and kind of go into some of the tools that I'm going to be using. But before I do that, I want to give just a very brief explanation of how the Fate Accelerated system works. So, this 2-page reference that can be found in the back of the Dresden Files Accelerated rulebook is all of the rules that you would actually need to play Fate once you understand the game. But essentially, you have the ladder, which is going to be a set of pluses or minuses in a ever-ascending scale, all the way from legendary down to terrible. Your character's approaches, how they do things, are going to be defined as one of these. So if I was good at being forceful, then I would get a +3 to any rolls with a forceful approach. On top of your ladder stat, there's going to be an opposition, which is going to be similarly defined, and then you're always going to roll 4 of these fate dice. The fate dice have 2 blanks, 2 minuses, and 2 pluses. You add up all of the results. So in this case, I got 2 blanks and 2 minuses. So I would subtract 2 from my score of good, which was a +3, to give me an overall score of a +1. If the +1 beats the score of the opposition or the opposed roll, then I was successful in my action. As far as actions goes, there are 4 basic actions. You can create an advantage, which is creating an aspect that your character can invoke, which we'll get into in a minute. You can attack, which is pretty obvious. You can defend, also obvious. And you can overcome. Overcoming is the catch-all category for anything that a skill check would cover in most role-playing games. For attacks, in particular, it's very simple. Your attack stat, whatever you beat your opponent by, plus your weapon damage, is going to be how much damage you inflict upon your enemy. As far as aspects go, they are narrative cues about the background of your character. For example, I am creating a character today, and he is going to be a wizard. And one of his aspects is going to be the Real Ray's Occult, established 1980, because he's going to own an occult bookstore. So any time that I could give a story justification for Ray to have an advantage because of this background, I can pay a fate point, which is the meta currency for the game, which is usually 3 or less that you're going to have at any given time, typically. And if I do, and the GM or the other players agree, then I get to add 2 to my roll because my character has a vested interest or a great skill in that area. So let's say that Ray is trying to convince a police officer that the books that he has for sale in his shop are actually not stolen despite the blood stains on them. He is going to try to use a somewhat deceptive approach to that, and it's going to use his guile. And I'm going to say for this example that Ray is going to have a fair skill in guile. That would be a +2. Now, I would just roll these dice and add that to my +2 and see what I got and see if I overcome the good stat of the police to notice that I'm full of crap. But instead, I am going to invoke my aspect of the real Ray's Occult, established 1980, being that I'm an expert in these books, I can be a little bit more convincing. So I roll my dice, I've got a +1 naturally, I've got an even, 2 pluses, 2 minuses, and then I get +2 for invoking my aspect. So that would add to a total of 4, which beats the 3 of the police officers, and that is how simple the system is. Before we get too far into the game, I want to go over some of the tools that I'm going to use. This is the newest edition, the Mythic 2nd Edition Emulator. I printed out just the rules summary for use in the game. I do have the printed book as well, but just the summary is going to be easier to use at the table. I didn't print off all of the random events and elements tables from the book, as there are, I think, around 50 of these tables, but I printed the ones that I thought would be most useful to me. I also have some extra sheets from the Mythic book to be able to use to track my adventure, and then I also have Alone Against the Spirit Realm, which is a supplement. It's an unofficial supplement for the Dresden Files Accelerator, Accelerated, to help you play this game solo. It does include its own oracle, but I'm not a big fan of its oracle, especially after having used the Mythic one, but I am a fan of all of the content generation tools that are specific to Dresden Files or that type of game in Alone Against the Spirit Realm. There are lots and lots of tables for creating interesting characters, bars, streets, creatures, factions, so on and so forth. So this is going to be something that I will lean on heavily when I am unsure or just want to be surprised by what happens in the story. Then, of course, I'm also going to use the Dresden Files Accelerated Role-Playing Game book. As I said at the beginning of the video, the printed version of this is out of print right now, and some of them online are going for rather hefty sums. I am not sure if this is ever going to see a reprint or not, but it is a very nice book to have. This is going to be referenced very briefly and infrequently during the game because all of the rules I need are right there, but during campaign and character creation, I will be using it quite a bit because there are some extras in there. The first step in Dresden Files Accelerated, and something that sets it apart from the standard Fate Accelerated rules, is you choose a mantle. A mantle is going to be most analogous to a character class, but it's more of a combination character class, ancestry, and background rolled into one. And basically what this is going to be is if you wanted to be a criminal mastermind or a magical practitioner or a werewolf or a vampire, all of these things are going to be choices that you have available to you. There's a ton of options, and if you are a fan of the Dresden Files books, anything that would make a potentially good character choice for a campaign is going to be something that you can choose in this case. So I chose Magical Practitioner. So with my Magical Practitioner mantle, that is going to provide me with a number of set stunts, and it is also going to give me a few extra stunts to choose from whenever I get my additional stunt. So I am going to write down all of the different conditions and stunts that I get for free. So I'm going to get exhausted as a sticky stunt. Sticky means that it lasts a little bit longer. So we're going to get 1 box of exhausted that we can check to use as a currency in the game. I'm going to get a box of burned out, which is a lasting, which is longer than sticky, a lasting currency that I can check to do fancy things with my other stunts. And then I am going to get third eye, which is also a sticky condition. And it has 1 box that I can likewise check to do fancy things with that. The third eye in particular allows your character to do the soul gaze and also to see creatures and characters for what they really are. So I will write down third eye on my stunts, and I will put a page number reminder. Then I am going to write down evocation and a page number reminder. In the world of Dresden Files, evocation is fast magic, magic that you could do in a hectic scene, whereas thaumaturgy, which I'm also going to write down, is more like ritual magic that takes a while. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I have access to the soul gaze because of my third eye. Now I have the choice of one of all of these other additional stunts, or I could create a stunt of my own, and there's rules for that. But I think for this, I just want to go ahead and choose one that's already created rather than creating a new one. Because I'm new to the system, I want to get a little bit more expertise in it before I go and create my own. And I see one here. I don't know that the mechanical benefit is going to be as useful to me as some of the others, but it really works with my high concept of owning this bookstore. So I'm going to choose Lore Master. It says once per session, I may declare that I am able to read obscure text in a mysterious language or determine the specific nature of a ritual upon seeing the precise location where it was cast. So we're writing down Lore Master and a page reminder, and that is that step of the creation process. Okay, I vaguely mentioned aspects earlier, and I mentioned how you could invoke them to be able to get bonuses on actions when they're appropriate narratively. But what I didn't mention is that they could also be used against you. If it is appropriate in the narrative, an enemy can invoke an aspect against you or compel you to do something that your character may not be in their best interest to do, but it is in the theme of their character to do. So you're supposed to start by choosing 2 concepts, or 2 aspects, a high concept, which is kind of an overall kind of description of what your character's background is. And that for me is going to be the real Ray's Occult Books. Established 1980. And if you know that reference, congratulations. So then I need to choose a trouble. The trouble is going to be an aspect that is going to be much easier to compel against me or invoke against me than it is to work in my favor. But even your trouble can work to your favor at times. So I've got that as, yeah, I failed the bar. So this guy, Ray, before he owned a bookstore, he was actually trying to be a lawyer, and he failed the bar. Now, the third aspect is supposed to be something that ties you into the world around you. And what I've chosen for that is going to be hard head, soft heart. So I think that Ray is going to be a guy that comes off as very cold, but he has good intentions and would never do anything to take advantage of the weak. Then you can add up to 2 more aspects to your character, which can be used to invoke or compel. And one of the things it does suggest is when you're choosing these aspects, you try to choose something that you can imagine times where it would be used in your favor or times where it would get you into some harder spots. And with that in mind, I am going to say my next aspect is I've seen the unthinkable. And I think maybe Ray, in his collecting of these occult books, perhaps he's gotten a glimpse of the outer things, the elder gods, the old ones, or traces of them. And that is something that he can't erase from his memory. And then for my last one, I'm going to use a movie quote that I thought would be interesting. And I said, how about a little fire, Scarecrow? And so with that, I think that says a few things about my character. I think it says that he is a devourer of pop culture, but also it says that he probably is going to favor fire whenever he's throwing his magic around. And so that is going to cover all of his aspects. And I'll go ahead and write down his name, which is Ray Levesque. And so then I'm going to choose his approaches. Now these approaches replace skills from the core version of the Dresden File and the core version of Fate. And basically I am choosing where upon the ladder I will have these different approaches. And whatever you're doing, you always get to choose which approach you're going to use. So you might be saying to yourself, well, what prevents a player from just always using the approach that has the highest number? That's a good question. And it does take a little bit of extra work on the GM's part to prevent that from being a problem. But basically, if you use force to solve everything, you're going to create a lot of problems for yourself because there's going to be a lot of collateral damage. You're never going to be very stealthy when you do things. Same thing if you use focus to solve everything. You're never going to get things done very fast, and you're always going to run into other problems. But you get to choose to have one of your approaches at good, 2 at fair, 2 at average, and 1 at mediocre. So I am going to go ahead and say that my intellect is going to be at good. That's my highest because I do own a bookstore. I'm going to, for my 2 at fair, I am going to do +2 to focus and +2 to flair. I think that probably watching all of these pop culture movies and things, perhaps Ray has acquired a bit of a flair for the dramatic. And then we're going to have 2 at average, which I'm going to say is guile and haste, and then 1 at mediocre, which is going to be force. He's just not a forceful guy. So then I am going to go ahead and get to choose my, or set my refresh rather. And so that's at 3 by default. This can go up as you raise in levels. And you can also spend refresh to gain extra stunts. So I am going to go back to my mantle and see if there's any extra stunts that I want to grab while I have this extra refresh at the beginning here. And I do think I am going to go ahead and choose 1 extra stunt. I'm going to use a refresh to buy Evocation Specialist. So with Evocation Specialist, I am going to get to choose a single approach element and action and get a +2 anytime I do that. And I'm going to say that that is going to be, let's do flare, even though it's not my highest stat, it seems appropriate. Flare, fire, and attack. And so whenever I do a flare-based fire attack, I'm going to get a +2 to that roll. And now I've lowered my refresh down to 2 to represent that I went ahead and bought that extra stunt. So my character sheet looks a bit like this right now. And let me zoom in a little bit on that. So I have got a 2 in flare, which a 2 in terms of fate is going to be fair. I've got a 2 in focus, which is fair. I've got mediocre in force, which is 0. I've got a +1, which is average in guile, +1 average in haste, and a +3 good in intellect. My high concept is the Real Rays Occult Books, established 1980. My trouble aspect is, yeah, I failed the bar. And then the other aspects of my character at this point are hard head, soft heart, I've seen the unthinkable, and how about a little fire scarecrow. My mantle is a magical practitioner, and I have, because of that, the third eye, evocation, thaumaturgy, soul gaze, and my electives were lore master and evocation, specifically with flare, fire, and attack. I have the conditions available to me of peril and doomed, which all characters get, and then I have indebted, which is something that will come up infrequently, and I have exhausted, burned out, and third eye. And I have chosen that my character is going to be in Chicago, not just because I want this to be a closer recreation to the Dresden Files novels, but also because I actually lived in Chicago for a little while, and so I know the city a little bit better than I would if I chose a different city to play in. And one of the things that the game suggests is you set up a few factions ahead of time. That way you have some different types of factions to interact with whenever you end up playing the game. Now, with that being said, I am going to go ahead and roll on the factions table from the back of the Alone Against the Realms supplement. So we're going to roll a d20. So that'll go to table 3. And then the Abyssal Council is one of the factions. So I would say that is probably not going to be a group of do-gooders. And then we're going to go with 219. The Shadow Order is a second faction. And the Hellfire Club is the third option. So, of my 3 factions, I'm going to have the Abyssal Council, the Shadow Order, and the Hellfire Club. And for each of those, I should be choosing a goal, potentially a secret goal, which I am actually not going to roll for, because if that comes up as a twist, I don't want to know what it is. And then I am going to need to get what obstacles that they might have, resources, weaknesses, aspects, and then what are their next steps. So I'm going to roll on the faction goals table for the Abyssal Council, and it is a 17, so I'm going to roll on table 2, and a 12, to establish a powerful and influential political party. Oh, to establish a powerful and influential political party. Okay. So that tells me a lot about the Abyssal Council. And since I've set this in Chicago, which is well known for having a rather corrupt political system, then that works with setting as well. The obstacles to their success would be greedy politicians and cops. And then resources, they would have money. Being that they're the Abyssal Council, I would say they're going to have demonic magic, and they are going to have influence. And then weaknesses, the divine, and they must work in shadows. And then aspects, we'll say there is no politician without a price. And then we'll say the council convenes. And I think the council convenes could imply that they share information, and that if one of them knows, probably most of them know. And then, so for the Shadow Order, we'll roll for their goal. And that 20, table 2, to infiltrate and control a government agency. Well, that makes sense with their name, the Shadow Order. So infiltrate and control a government agency. Let's go ahead and pick that. Let's say they want to take over the Federal Reserve, because there is a Federal Reserve branch in Chicago, and that would potentially give them lots of opportunity to buy influence. Their resources are going to be information and unregulated magic. They're going to be mortals, but they're working off the books to try to take advantage of unskilled mortals. And their aspects, I'm not going to give them weaknesses here because I didn't give myself enough room, but their aspects are going to be the Shadow Nose, because they deal in information, and then their second aspect is going to be the first rule of the Shadow Order, because I think that they don't share. And then the last faction to start the game with is going to be the Hellfire Club, be the first table, and their goal is to create a powerful army of undead or other creatures to enforce their will. So create an army of undead. So I think they're necromancers. That's what we're going with anyways. And necromancy breaks one of the laws of magic, so they have to work kind of off the books as well. Their resources going to be magic and stealth and Faustian bargains. So they might actually end up being somewhat aligned, at least tenuously, with the Abyssal Council. And we'll just go ahead and give them some aspects, not worry about their weaknesses yet. And we'll say an aspect is wherever they go, they wake the dead. And that'll be the only aspect I give them for now. So I've got my 3 different factions. I've got my character created. I do want to create, at least in principle, a couple of NPCs. And I'm going to go ahead and insert one of them as David McDevitt, who is going to be a champion of God. And I think that would be appropriate for Ray to know, and also with the factions that we have established here. And then for the others, I'm just going to roll some random names. I said random names, but actually I'm going to roll random creatures. So this is, again, from the Alone Against the Spirit Realm, and this is page 19, and there is a great general creature creation table. So I'm going to roll 2 more NPCs. I've already got 1. So in the mortal realm, it's going to be a human, and so I roll on the human table. It's a regular human, and so I'm going to roll for his details. He is generous, or she, and a generous graphic designer. Okay. And maybe this person's been trying to talk me into putting my books online, and I know that I would not be able to sell most of my books online, because in the world of Dresden, wizards and magic users in general, they create lots of problems with technology, so putting them up online would not be particularly helpful. But let's go ahead and roll a name for this character. And I got a 19, which is going to be table 11. And that gives me Mihail. So that's a good Russian name, it looks like. This doesn't have last names, so I will actually go ahead and roll the last name. Later, I'll use the Russian table from the Stars Without Numbers book. And then I'll go ahead and get back to rolling another NPC. And it is a vampire. Interesting. And it is a vampire animal. Yeah, I think I'm going to re-roll that. I don't want to deal with a vampire animal for my 3rd NPC. So let's go with this. Let's see. No, I've already got a human. Let's do something else. A were creature. We can do that. So then I got a werewolf and description. He's an optimist, or she's an optimist. And job, a werewolf plumber. And the werewolf plumber, their name is going to be on the mortal table, Jenny. So my guess is that I've met Mihail and Ginny through the bookstore, and I probably met David from my previous adventures. So at this point, I've got everything that this book tells me to get ready for the game, but I still need to put some of those into my threads and characters list for Mythic. So what I am going to do is I'm going to go ahead and place the Abyssal Council on here twice. I'm going to place the Shadow Order on here once, and then I'm going to place the Hellfire Club on here twice. Oh, that's on threads. I've got it on the wrong section. Whoops. So let's have different things. Let's say, so threads are going to be like story elements and goals to pursue for my character. So let's change that to stop the Abyssal Council, because they're wanting to establish a powerful and influential political party. And let's go to discover the Shadow Order. That'll be another story beat that I could pursue. And prevent the rise of the Hellfire Club. And then for two more threads, I'm going to say acquire ancient tomes, because I do own a bookstore, and preserve knowledge, because I am kind of an intellectual. Then for the characters list, that's where I can add the actual different factions and characters that I've met. So let's go ahead and put David on here. And we're going to put Mihail on here and Jenny on here. And then we're going to put the Abyssal Council. And we're going to put the Hellfire Club. But we're going to leave off the Shadow Order, because one of my threads is to discover who they are. So whenever I have events that I don't know what shows up or what aspect of the story that they affect in the Mythic engine, I'm going to be able to roll on these tables and help to determine that. And that is my first day done in my 5 days with the Fae. All right, so we're ready for day 2 in my 5 days with the Fae. And my character needs an inciting event, something that's going to start his adventure. And so for that, I am going to turn back to Alone Against the Spirit Realm. Because they've got this really nice adventure seed creator. Now there's an adventure creator in the Mythic engine as well, but this is a little more specific to the source. So we got a number 4. A person hired me to find his daughter. She was last seen in a bar. You know the place the person is describing is run by the Red Vampire Court. You accept the assignment hesitantly. You know there's going to be a lot of trouble coming your way, but the payment is said to be extraordinarily good, whatever that means. So let's go to my adventure list, and we are going to go ahead and roll a random character, which character can also actually be an organization by this definition. And we're going to roll on that to see who's involved. So that's a 2. So it's actually David McDevitt that needs my help. David is the champion of God character that I know. And so his daughter was last seen in a bar that's run by the Red Vampire Court. I know the place he's describing. I accept it hesitantly. There's going to be a lot of trouble. Okay. Okay, so based upon our adventure seed we rolled, I need to figure out the name of David's daughter. I'm also going to find a name for the bar, and as well as where the bar is at. And looking through the names, the first one that jumped out at me would be Sarah. So that's going to be Sarah McDevitt. And then for the bar, and I'm using names from the Alone Against the Spirit Realm. And so we're going to go ahead and roll on this wonderful bar table. The second table, number 5. So it's the Pint and Quill. So the Pint and Quill is where this is going to take place. And I am going to go ahead and make the assumption that David is not going to want to join me, perhaps because his presence is known by the Red Court, and it might create more problems than solutions by him being there, and he trusts me to go do this. I'm going to say that that's very likely to be the case. So I'm looking at my fate chart now. The starting chaos factor is 5. Normally at the beginning of a scene you roll to see if the scene is going to be interrupted. For the first scene, I am not going to roll that randomly because I want this to be the scene that I rolled from the Alone Against the Spirit Realm chart. So I'm saying it's very likely David cannot go with me or it will cause more problems. So I got a 25. Yeah, so 75 or less would be yes. So I'm not quite a yes and, but definitely a yes. So I am on my own here. Now, just because the Red Court runs the bar, that does not mean that they're there all the time. And it doesn't mean I'm going to have a direct run-in with them. However, if I create any problems there, they will probably be the ones that would want to seek revenge upon me. So I am going to go ahead and roll a couple of streets, or actually just one street, for the bar to be on. So it is at 3 Redwood Avenue. So let's say it's 920 Redwood Avenue. So and very appropriate that the Paint and Quill, and I'm adding Paint and Quill to my characters threads, or character list. Very appropriate that it would be on Redwood Avenue, since it is Red Court Vampire Ran. And I'm going to add Red Court Vampires to that character list as well. So I am going to go ahead and hail a cab and head to the Pint and Quill to go asking questions about David McDevitt's daughter, Sarah. And I am going to roll an action and a descriptor to see kind of what the scene looks like. So I'm going to roll an action table 2, 83. So that's safety. And a descriptor 39. Safety, frighteningly. So I went ahead and wrote that down next to a 1 because it's scene 1. Safety, frighteningly means to me that Sarah is safe, but the frighteningly means that that safety may be perilous. It may not be lasting. So I'm going to guess that maybe the folks in the bar or the Red Court themselves know about her father's involvement as a champion of God, and perhaps they want to use her as leverage. I'm going to say that that's likely. Is that the case? I'm asking the Oracle, and I've got a chaos factor of 5. So 38, I need to get 65 or less, so yes, that is the case. So when I get to the bar, one of the bikers that is kind of listening to me ask questions, he approaches me and lets me know that if I don't want anything to happen to Sarah, I should probably just go ahead and leave. And I am going to try to approach this from a point of view of intellect, and I'm going to try to convince the biker that it is not a good plan, not a good life choice to invoke the wrath of a champion of God. So I'm going to say that I need a good result, and I've got a +3 intellect or a good intellect, so I need to get either even or better on my roll for my overcome check. I'm making an overcome action here. So I got a negative. So I actually fail my overcome action, which means the biker is not impressed by my threat, and perhaps he maybe motions to a couple of other bikers to show me exactly what I am dealing with. I think that is likely. So let's go ahead and roll that, and we're at a chaos factor of 5. So 06. So that's not just likely, that is an exceptional yes. So yeah, so the biker is going to call over a couple of his buddies to cause problems for me. Okay, and so now we get to see what a conflict encounter is going to look like. So I have gathered my fate for the session. I get 2 because I bought an extra stunt when I was creating my character yesterday. And then I've used the rules from the Dresden Files Accelerated to create some minor NPCs. And the way this is going to work, if they go to Intimidate or Brawl, they're going to get a +2 on that roll. If they're going to try to Reason, they're going to get a -2. And because there's 3 of these minor NPCs, I gave them 3 stress points. Each time I do a stress, they're going to lose 1 of their number. But until then, they get a bonus of +1 for help rolls because there's more of them than there are of me. And then I gave them the aspect of half drunk, which I could invoke to give myself a bonus if I can give a narrative reason why it makes sense to do so. Now, you might look at my character sheet and see all of my magic. I've got evocation, which I could use in this case. I've got thaumaturgy, which would not be as good. I've got soul gaze. I could potentially soul gaze with one of them and learn a deep, dark secret about them. But one thing to keep in mind is within the book, there is a set of rules for magic that is strictly enforced by the White Council, and using magic against mortals can be very dicey, because if you accidentally kill one, you are guilty of a crime that is punishable by death, and they don't play around. Don't need a warden on me, after all. So instead, I think what I am going to do to start this encounter, as I see them start to grip the beer bottles on the table next to them, I am going to try to use my intellect, and I am going to use an evocation spell of the air element, and I am going to attempt to create an advantage. Being that they're a little bit wobbly, I'm going to try to very subtly cast a spell that will knock them over using air. So I am actually going to go ahead and mark 2 stress boxes off to do this, because as a wizard, I can use my stress to also fuel my spells. And really, if you're coming from a different RPG, especially Dungeons and Dragons, you should not look at your stress and conditions as hit points. It's a totally different thing. This is a narrative conflict system, not a attrition combat system. So I'm using 2 of these resources, the stress, in order to make my spell more powerful, but it's not the same as using 2 hit points. That being said, I am going to go ahead and roll, and then they will roll against me as I am creating a advantage. And I am using my intellect, and I've added 2 to my roll because I am adding my stress for that using my evocation stunt. They are not getting a bonus. I could argue that they would use reasoning to try to figure out that I'm trying to get them off balance, but I don't think I'm going to do that. I'm just going to give them an even roll. So I am going to be at +3, 5, and they're going to be at even. They are the gold dice. I'm the white dice. So I got a 4, and they got a -2. So I beat them by 6, which, whenever you look at the rules for create an advantage, that means I succeeded with style. I get an aspect with 2 free invokes on it. So I think the aspect that I am going to create on them with 2 free invokes is going to be knocked down. And so they are going to attempt to overcome an advantage. So I'm going to have them roll against my intellect just with their base roll. And they got a -4, I got a -1, I got a +3 from my intellect, so I beat them. So they do not get rid of their aspect of being knocked down. Meanwhile, I am going to attempt to hightail it back to the bookstore. Of course, I took a cab, so the cab is likely gone. Let's go ahead and roll that. I think it's actually probably very likely in this neighborhood that it's gone. And this is a chaos factor of 5. So 41, yeah, it's gone. So the cab is gone. I'm running out of the bar in a bad neighborhood over on 920 Redwood Avenue. And I need to figure out a way to not be killed. So things are going just swimmingly for me. I have failed to convince the bikers that are associated with the Red Court Vampires to go ahead and release my friend's daughter, and I have just ticked them off thoroughly in trying to escape and using a very shifty wind spell to knock them down before I ran out of the room. I'm going to go ahead and roll twice on descriptor table to see what I see when I get out of the door of the bar and my cab is gone. Joyfully, 79, peacefully, joyfully and peacefully. So, joyfully and peacefully. Okay, so I took a minute to think about what joyfully and peacefully would mean in the context of the scene that I've created. And I think that means that joyfully means I'm really happy to see this, and peacefully I'm going to take to mean peace officer. I think that there is a cop that happens to be patrolling by as I come barging out of the door of the bar, and probably the bikers don't want to draw any attention to the illegal activities that are going on within their bar, so I am able to scamper off and get away. So at the end of that scene, I was out of control of the scene, so that means the chaos factor goes up to a 6. That makes it more likely that future scenes are going to be interrupted or not what I expected. As far as my characters, I don't have anybody to take off of the list, and I do think I want to add the, I'm going to call them the PQ bikers, because they come from the Pint and Quill, because I have made an enemy of them. And I'm going to add Chicago's Finest to the list as well, because I've seen them now. So I did run off, and I think what I want to do at this point is head back to the bookstore and try to maybe create a thaumaturgical spell to identify where Sarah might be being held at. Okay, so before I write anything down for this next scene, I need to see if this is going to need a, if it's going to be an expected scene or not. So the chaos factor is now 6. I roll a d10, 7. It's above the chaos factor, so it is the expected scene. So I head back to the bookstore, and I am going to create a tracking spell. And I'm going to do that with some chalk, and I'm going to draw a circle. I'm going to take the photograph of Sarah that Mike or David had given me, and I am going to use some of the incense that I've collected from the Far East and use my tracking spell. Now there's an example of using thaumaturgy for a tracking spell in the book, and so that is going to be how I'm going to rate the difficulty of this. It says that in that case the character was in a hurry, and so it caused it to be a little bit more difficult and made it a great roll, which is a 4 or better that he needed. And I think that makes a lot of sense. So I am going to use my intellect and the collections of different occult books that I have to quickly figure out the necessary components of this spell. So I'm going to use Intellect, which is a +3. And because I took the Magic Practitioner, I get a Thaumaturgy skill, which adds 2. So I'm getting +5 to my roll, and I need to get a 4 or better. And so I got an 8, so I beat it by 4. So I succeeded with style on my Thaumaturgy roll. So I have created the tracking circle, and I have a really good idea of where Sarah is being held at. And I'm going to roll to see what that is before I end my day. I went ahead and lowered the chaos factor because I'm in control in this scene. I'm going to roll an action and a descriptor. The action, I got a 99, usurp. Okay. And descriptor, I got a 44. Okay, so I got gracefully usurp for the result. And what I think that means is that a mid-level creature in the Red Court Vampires is trying to potentially move up the command chain with a coup, using the daughter as kind of a currency, because that would be a big victory for them to grab the daughter of a champion of God. So we're going to say Red Court Vampire coup attempt. And that is day 2, and that is where we're going to finish off today. All right, so day 3. I am standing outside of my bookstore, and I have just successfully cast the tracking spell, and I got the result of gracefully usurp, which led me to believe that there was a mid-level Red Court vampire attempting a coup against a higher ranking vampire, and that is who has David's daughter. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to roll on the location types table from against the Spirit Realm, and that is going to be locations 3, the zoo. So that is where this vampire's hideout is at the zoo. That seems kind of interesting to me, so I am going to go ahead and make the assumption that he holds up around the bat area. Maybe in maybe the zoo there has taken down their bat display, but he has taken up refuge there. It's kind of out of the way and maybe under renovation at this time. So I'm going to roll some details for this place. Peaceful, old, and there's a hailstorm going on. So this is at the zoo, the bat sanctuary. It's peaceful, old, and it's hailing. Well, the hailing works to my advantage, I would think, because I could potentially approach less noticed, maybe. Now, I am still a little bit low on my stress because I took 2 stress when I cast my wind spell when I was out at the bar. And so because I had to go from one scene to the next with no break in between, because I couldn't risk wasting time with his daughter on the line, I did not heal up. Normally between scenes, if you've got some downtime, you would heal up, but I think that I've been running from one place to the other and with very little break in between. That's what I'm going with anyways. So I am going to approach trying to do so a little bit stealthily, which is going to be a little bit difficult because my guile is only a +1. But I think I am going to go ahead and invoke my aspect of hard head, soft heart, spending one of my 2 fate points to, well, I guess I can actually wait to spend that, but I'm probably going to end up using that to give me an additional +2 to this roll. But anyways, I'm going to try to hit a good, that's a +3 or better, roll for my stealth check to sneak into the area I'm trying to get to. Oh, and I got a 4, so I don't even need to use the fate point. So I've got my 2 fate points still. So I approach stealthily, and the Red Court vampire does not see me. But what do I see? And I just realized I did not roll to see if there was an interrupted scene here. So let's go ahead and do that. 1, so that is below a 5, so that is going to be an interrupted scene. So the way that will work it's odd, so it's an altered scene. So I'm going to roll a d10 on the adjustment table. Remove an object. Since there's not really any objects established other than the zoo itself, and it's hailing outside, which there is an aspect of hailing to the scene right now, and an aspect of old. But removing an object to me, the only thing I could think of that makes sense in this case is the bonds that I expected there to be on David's daughter, Sarah. And so with no bonds, that tells me that maybe she is actually there willingly at this point. Let's see. So I think that it is 50-50. And we have currently a chaos factor of 5. So 43. So the bonds are, they are not there. So she's there willingly at this point. So maybe this is an act of rebellion. And so maybe she is there of her own volition at this point. So as I approach and I see that Sarah is unimpeded by bonds around her hands, I am going to appeal to her judgment and make the case that she should come with me. And I got a 2, and I'm going to roll for her, and we're going to say she's defending with force because she is thinking emotionally, not with her head. And so her force is a 2, so she got a 3, and I got a 2. I am going to invoke hard head, soft heart. And appealing to the soft-hearted nature of Ray, I am going to give myself that +2 that puts me 1 over where she is at, appealing to her better nature that she should come with me and leave this place. But as I'm having that conversation, is it possible that the vampire may be right around the corner, either listening or potentially just walking around the corner? Let's say, I think it's very likely that he is close by. So 81. He is actually not close by. Perhaps he knows that she was there of her own volition, and because of that, he felt comfortable leaving her here. And now that I have talked her into giving up on this plan, then now the next step is trying to get away without being killed by these vampires. So I am going to attempt to cast a spell, and my spell is going to evoke water, and I'm going to try to increase the effect of the storm to obscure our escape. So I am going to go ahead and use 2 points of stress to add to my roll, and I'm doing this with Flare. So I'm adding +4 to my roll here. And I got an extra 1, because these two cancel each other out. So 4, 5, and I needed to get a 3 or better. So I beat it by 2 with my spell roll, which was an a create advantage action. So I've added another tag, so I'm also going to add to Hailing an Old Heavy Rain. And we are going to attempt to use haste to get out of here quickly before they come back. And I got 1 for haste +3 on the dice is going to be 4 for a great result. I think that's going to get us out of here with that overcome action that I just took. So we do get out of the zoo, and we are going to head back to meet up with Michael. Okay, so it is now day 4, and we just left the zoo. I had convinced Sarah that she needed to give up her plan to join the Red Court vampires, and I whisked her away back to the bookstore where I could call for her father to come and take over the duty of protecting her. But I think that there's a possibility she may have already been infected as they call it a vampiric virgin, one that has got the taste for blood but has not fed yet. So let's go ahead and see if that is the case. Since I was in control of the last scene at the end, that's going to put me down to a 4 for the chaos factor. So I've had some good dice rolls. So it was likely that she was infected. So 4. So no, she is actually not infected. I rolled a 67. That's above the likely range. So I got extremely lucky that she was not infected. But that being said, I call for Michael, and let's go ahead and see if we have an altered scene. We do not. So Michael is going to arrive, and then I'm going to give him the duty of taking the reins of protecting his daughter and whisking her away from the eye of the Red Court. And in doing so, I am also going to ask Michael what that payment that he had offered me was going to be. And to find out what that is, I am going to roll on the random items table from Alone Against the Spirit Realm. A bag of holding. So I don't know how Michael came across a bag of holding. I'm guessing that it probably is something that he picked up while battling some minion of evil, and he is now giving me his bag of holding. So that could come in handy later. So let's go ahead and write that down. Now in this game, an item can be many different things. It could be a stunt, it could be an aspect, or it could be like a boost, like a one-time aspect that you could do. Since I don't want to spend a refresh to create this, I'm just going to say that it's an aspect for right now. And let's go ahead and consult with the Oracle and find out what is going on in this scene. I'm going to go ahead and roll on the action table and then on a descriptor. So a 10, action is bargain, and descriptor is 57. Bargain kindly. So I think that likely what this means is that Michael wants to bargain with me, and even though I have kindly returned his daughter to him, he sees value in what I have done, and he thinks that I could be helpful in dealing with the Red Court and making sure that they don't do this to anyone else in the future. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to take that bargain. And so next time what we are going to be looking for is how we are going to try to enact some retribution towards the Red Court. So we are going to set up retribution towards the Red Court. And I think I'm going to go ahead and roll a research using my focus skill and try to figure out as much as I can about the Red Court and their weaknesses. And I got an even roll. I'm going to go ahead and invoke my last fate point to give me +2 and then plus my focus of 4. And the aspect I invoked was the Real Ray's Occult Bookstore, established in 1980. So with that, I'm using the resources in my bookstore to find out as much as I can about these Red Court vampires. And so I'm going to create an aspect with my advantage of I know their weakness. Whoops, wrong there. Okay, and that is the end of day 4. All right, so we are on to our final day for this playthrough anyways. We may revisit these characters at a future time, perhaps in the original Dresden Files RPG. But what we are going to address here, one thing that I didn't talk about earlier was scale. So on the character sheets for characters in Dresden File, there are scale titles, and for example, wizards typically operate at a supernatural scale whenever they are casting spells. And if you have a higher level of scale than your enemy, then you can add +1 on a roll, or you can take 2 additional shifts on a roll after it is determined to be successful, or you can add a free invoke to an advantage that you create. So Ray is going to operate at supernatural scale when he is casting spells. If you are keeping track, Ray also had a friend by the name of David McDevitt, who was I kept calling him a champion of God. He's actually a Knight of the Cross. I went ahead and created him because he had convinced Ray to help him rid the city of the scourge of the vampire who took his daughter, Sarah. And I've gone ahead and created David, that way I am not taking up additional time in the video to do that. There is his character sheet. I also, at the end of the last day, had been rather successful at creating an advantage by doing some studying on the Red Court vampires. And I myself needed to do a little studying on the Red Court vampires because I am only 2 books into the Dresden Files. So I knew generally what they were, but I wanted to make sure I stayed as close as I could to the canon there. And one thing that I thought about after the session was over was, you know, why would he just leave this girl here for me to so easily convince that she had made a mistake and to come back with me? And I think that it is because he has already infected her with the kiss, and so she has the addiction to the Red Court saliva, and he knows that she will be bait for David. And perhaps the real reason why the vampire who I've named Santos Cabrera, the real reason that the Red Court vampire had taken her was to draw back in David, because David is the actual fish and Sarah was just the bait. The Red Court vampire, I think, wants to take Amarachius, the sword, from David, and that be his prize that's going to show why he should lead the local group of Red Court vampires. So we are on to day 5, and we're also on to scene 5. The end of the last scene, I was in control, so I lowered my chaos factor down again to a 3 now. And so the next scene, the expected scene, after I prepared for taking down the vampire back at the occult bookstore, and since I got an advantage on that, I created an advantage with a free invoke. I wrote that aspect as I know their weakness, and because their weakness is sunlight, and because I just acquired a bag of holding, I think what I am going to do is I'm going to have a UV floodlight that I'm going to throw in the bag of holding and have ready to give a little sunburn to the vampire. But my expected scene is going back to the zoo lair, to the old bat sanctuary there, and I'm going to see right now if it is going to be an expected scene or something else. It is the expected scene. So we already know kind of what that looks like from the other time we were there. Of course, now it is not going to be necessarily hailing or raining, but it is peaceful and old are the aspects there, and I'm going to add one of dark because we can't waste any time, and we want to make sure that he is where we can access him and not hidden away. So Ray and David are going to take David's car to the zoo, and they're going to scale the old wrought iron fence, and they are going to make their way carefully to the bat enclosure. And as they are coming upon it, I am going to roll a description and action, or descriptor in action. And for the action, I'll roll on 2 this time. It's a 6, so balance. And descriptor, I'll roll on 2, juvenile balance. So I think what that means is that perhaps the vampire has another victim, and so I can't put all of my focus on dealing with the vampire. So maybe Santos is going to kind of point up to a young person that is hanging. We'll say even it is a girl and odd it's a boy. So it's a boy. So there's a young man hanging from the bat enclosure with a rope that as soon as we start walking up the walkway to the enclosure, Santos is going to fray the rope a little bit and then hop down to meet our gaze. So I need to do something to save this young man, and Santos is going to be looking to focus on David. So here is Santos Cabrera. He is considered a supporting NPC. So his two aspects are ambitious and only comes out at night. I can give him a sunburn condition which will prevent him from healing. He is getting a +2 to fight, agility, and clever, and a -2 to intuition. Anybody that uses a force approach against him takes a -2. Anybody that uses an intellect approach against him takes a -2. And then he has the optional stunt, the kiss, because he can infect humans to have an addiction to the red quartz saliva. So to start this scene, I am going to say that Ray is going to tell David to take care of Santos and he will take care of the kid. But before he starts to worry about taking care of the kid, he is going to dump out the UV floodlight that he brought with him, and he is going to pop that baby on to shine some UV light onto Santos. And I'm going to say that is going to be a flare approach, and he is going to get a free invoke on that, and it's going to be damaging, and it's going to go against Santos's clever. We'll see if he's prepared for that or not. So both are getting a +2 naturally. The gold are Santos and the white are Ray's dice, but then Ray is getting an additional +2 because of the aspect tag. So Ray is going to be overall at a +1 from where he started, and Santos is going to be even because Ray had that additional +2. So I'm going to say that's going to be enough to mark sunburned before Santos is able to shatter the UV floodlight. So his skin is kind of boiling and hissing, and he is obviously thinking that maybe he's underestimated his foes at this point. Next up, I am going to go with David, and before he left, he declared that he was on a mission from God in order to rid the city of the scourge that is the Red Court. And as such, he is within his domain to use his Sword of the Cross. So David operates on an otherworldly level, and Santos actually is considered supernatural, we'll say. I don't know if that's right for vampires, but you can let me know in the comments if you know. And so David's getting a a 1 scale level bonus, and he's going to use his sword, and he's going to use his faithful approach because he's doing this to rid the world of this demonic creature. And so the vampire is going to use agility, which he gets a +2 at, but David is going to use faithful, which he gets a +5 at. So he's got a 3-point bonus over the vampire. And he comes out even. The vampire comes out +1. but he's still, so David is still going to be +2 because he had a better approach than the vampire did. And then the sword is going to be a 2 damage weapon, so that's going to be 4 points of stress that he is going to inflict upon the vampire. And then the vampire is going to get to act. And he is, his skin is boiling and hissing, and there's kind of bubbling up where the UV lights have hit him, and his belly has been sliced, and he is definitely enraged. And he is going to invoke the failed out of the seminary aspect from David, because he's talked to David's daughter, so he knows about this, and he's going to call into question David's his purpose in God's plan. And so he's going to get a +2 to his attack against David because of that. And he is going to roll, he's going to do an agility attack, and it's going to be David using his focus to try to stay in the moment and to not let the vampire get in his head. So the vampire is getting a +4 overall, and David is getting a +1. So David's probably going to take some damage here. Okay, so vampire's even, David's at +2. So David is actually only going to take 1 point of stress. So we're going to mark off 1 point of stress. So I think what happens here is that the vampire leaps at David, and David is able to kind of shoulder block him out of the way. It takes some energy, but no real wounds inflicted. So then we'll go back around to Ray, who is going to kind of run up underneath the boy that is suspended in air above the bat enclosure, and he is going to try to create a water spell that is going to catch the young man when he falls. And so he's going to have to get a good result, which is a +3 or better, and he is trying to work hastily, so he's only going to get a +1 to his roll, and he gets a -1. So he is a little bit more tired than what he thought he was, and his spell just kind of fizzles out. And at that same time, the rope breaks and the young man falls. So we'll see later what that is going to mean for things. But then we're going to go back to David, who is going to declare to Santos that he cannot be fooled so easily by a wretch such as this Red Court vampire. So he is going to again attack with his faithful approach, which is +5, and it's going to be against the agility approach of Santos. So he's effectively at a +3 advantage over Santos. So Santos ends up at even, David ends up at +1, so, and then you add +1 and +3, so that's 4, and then 2 extra for the weapon damage, and that is going to be more stress than what the Red Court vampire can endure. So he, it's even going to be more than he could mark in peril for, because that's, I don't think that's going to cover, let me check on that. Yeah, it's right here on this character sheet. Imperil only knocks 4 off of that, so, oh, I guess he could then. So he'll mark Imperil, and then he'd have 1 left, I believe, at that point. So What happens here is David finishes slicing open the Red Court vampire's belly. It is starting to ooze out its gooey innards, and I think this is going to be the time where the vampire is going to concede. And so the vampire is actually going to declare that he's not done with David, but he is done for today. So the vampire is going to take off. He's going to fly away, taking his bat form that is hidden within his skin mask that is the human body he was using. And upon leaving the scene, the two of the remaining heroes are going to inspect the young man that has fallen and see what happens there. And we're going to roll action 2, 59, news, and descriptor 2, 12. News is colorful. So to me, what that means is that the news is good. Colorful to me means good. So I'm going to say that the young man is hurt, but not badly hurt, and a trip to the local hospital may be in order, but it looks like he's going to be okay. And being that the news was colorful, I'm going to say that he wasn't even quite yet infected. So that is going to end day 5 with Ray and David having driven away the Red Court vampire Santos, and then David is still going to have to deal with the fact that his daughter Sarah has been infected by a Red Court vampire, and maybe she'll have to join the Order of St. Giles, but that is a story for another day. So that was Dresden Files Accelerated. More specifically, that was 5 days of playing Dresden Files Accelerated. So what did I think? Well, I think that I like a lot of what's going in the Dresden Files Accelerated, but I do think that I'm probably going to be more in line with the original Dresden Files role-playing game, which is closer to the Fate Core rules. It was actually designed a little bit before the Fate Core rules were shored up, and it has a little bit more detail to it, a full-on skill system instead of just approaches, and a lot more choices to make, especially when it comes to magic and thaumaturgy. But overall, I really like the way that the system is so simple. You have your attacks, you have your overcomes, you have your create an advantage, and then you have your defense. And that can cover pretty much anything that you can do in your mind. You're not limited by a very narrow set of options. You are allowed to imagine what could be whenever you're playing the game. I think this really opens up an enormous amount of role play for the right group. That being said, if you've got folks that just want to make optimal choices, you're going to be fighting them a lot on the approach system. And I think for that reason alone, the original Dresden Files role-playing game might be a better choice for a lot of groups. Again though, the accelerated version is super quick, character creation is a breeze in it, and it doesn't have some of the clunkier aspects of the Dresden Files role-playing game. So this was my first time actually playing through DFA, and I was kind of learning as I went, and as such, I probably made some mistakes. I'd love to hear about it in the comments. No, really, I would. I would like to hear ways that I can improve my game. You know, sometimes whenever I'm doing these games on camera, I also tend to make decisions hastily that I would if I was playing without the camera on me. I would probably backtrack and redo, but it's just a little bit more complicated when you're doing it on camera. So one of the things that I talked about at the beginning of the video was how this book is out of print and it's hard to find. But I was pleasantly surprised to find out that The Hidden Layer in Mount Zion, Illinois, you can find them online, search the name, and they'll come up. They have like 20 copies of this book at retail price, $35. They don't have it on their website, but if you call them and tell them that you want to order it, I am quite confident they will sell you the books. So if you want to get a copy of this on the cheap, the guys at The Hidden Layer in Mount Zion, Illinois would be a wonderful group to reach out to. I don't get paid for this. I just like the guys at The Hidden Layer. They've been very kind, and I've talked to them many times. They're a good group of guys, and I would like to help them get rid of some inventory. And I'd like to help you guys find this awesome role-playing game without having to pay an arm and a leg for it. So this is the end of my 5 days with the Fae, and would I come back to the Never Never again and play Dresden Files Accelerated? I think I would, but I think before I do that, I would want to try the original Dresden Files role-playing game, just to decide which one would be best for me. I got a hunch it might be that one. But that being said, please do like, share, and subscribe. And you know, I do enjoy doing these videos for you, but it does help to get more people to be able to see them by interacting with the algorithm, and like, sharing, and subscribing is the best way that you can do that. Next week, I will probably have a video, I'm thinking on maybe Sentinel Comics RPG. One of the viewers had reached out to me, and if you're down there in Australia watching, that's something that you can look forward to next week probably. But until next time, this has been Justin from Books, Bricks, and Boards. Good gaming, and God bless.